In this talk, we will learn about the basics of community ecology and focus more on interspecific interactions. A community is defined as populations of different species that live close enough for interactions amongst one another. Thus, community ecology is the study of different biotic and abiotic factors that can influence the organization as well as functioning of different communities. The members of a community, which include members of different species, can interact with one another, and these types of interactions are called as interspecific interactions. Interspecific interactions can have various effects on the survival as well as reproduction of the interacting members of a community. These effects can be beneficial or detrimental. There are different types of interspecific interactions, which include competition, predation, parasitism, herbivory, mutualism, and commensalism. Let us look at each one of these. Competition is a type of interspecific interaction where individual species compete with other species for resources. This type of interaction limits the survival and reproduction of all species that are involved. Thus, this is a negative type of interaction. Species tend to compete with one another for different types of resources, and usually these resources are limited. Different species can compete with one another for territory, food, water, and other types of resources. Another type of interspecific interaction is predation. In predation, one species hunts and kills another species and finally consumes them for food. Thus, in predation, one species benefits at the expense of another species. Thus, it is beneficial for one of the species but detrimental to the other species. The behavior of predation is commonly observed in carnivores who play the role of the predator, while the species that they hunt and consume are the prey. In predation, the survival of the predator is dependent on the availability of the prey. Usually, there are more prey in an environment and less predators. However, if a situation arises where the prey become extinct, then eventually the predator will also become extinct. We can see this in this experiment where we have two members, which is Didinium and Paramecium, that are present in the same environment. The Didinium is the predator while the Paramecium is the prey. If the numbers of Paramecium dwindle away and all of them die out, then eventually we will see that the Didinium will also die out completely because their food source, which is the Paramecium, is no longer available. However, we do observe a delay in the dwindling numbers of Didinium compared to that of Paramecium. Predators have evolved different traits that allow them to hunt and kill prey. These include structures like fangs or claws, as well as venom and attributes like speed. Similarly, prey have also evolved traits to avoid predation. There are many different types of traits that have been evolved, and one of them is in the form of behavioral defenses. Prey are known to be able to hide more efficiently as well as flee from predators. In some instances, we can see different species that tend to be preyed upon to live in groups so that they can collectively defend themselves from predators. Another type of adaptation that is commonly observed in prey are mechanical defenses. This is the presence of different structures on the body that help to deter predators. This can include tough skin as well as different structures on the body, like quills, which is commonly seen in porcupines, as well as armor that can be seen in some lizards. Some prey have evolved chemical defenses to deter predators. These chemical defenses are usually associated with the synthesis of chemical compounds that can harm or deter predators. Some animals, like skunk, are able to expel chemicals into the environment that will deter predators. On the other hand, we do have other animals that are able to make or obtain chemicals from the environment that make the predators feel sick when they consume these prey. Such an example are the monarch butterflies that can make some birds sick. When birds consume these monarch butterflies and don't feel well, then they no longer consume them, and hence the monarch butterflies are able to protect themselves from predation. Animals that make other animals sick upon consumption are said to be poisonous. Thus, the monarch butterflies that we just talked about are poisonous to some birds. Some animals that are poisonous can warn predators by exhibiting bright colors, as observed with the frogs shown in the picture. This feature is called aposematic coloration. These bright colors serve as a warning to predators and hence make the predators more wary of the prey. Some animals show the phenomenon of cryptic coloration. This is when the color of the animal is such that it allows it to camouflage with its surroundings. This allows the prey to easily blend in with the surroundings, and hence it's difficult for predators to spot the prey. Mimicry is a common feature where one species mimics another species and is commonly shown by prey as a mechanism to defend themselves from predators. There are different types of mimicry, and the common ones are Batesian mimicry, Mullerian mimicry, self-mimicry, Wassmannian mimicry, and aggressive or Peckmann mimicry. When a harmless species mimics the strategies of a harmful species, then that mimicry is called Batesian mimicry. The harmless species can mimic the harmful species in different ways, and one way is by mimicking the appearance. Let us take the example of the hornet and the hornet moth. Hornets are able to defend themselves from predators because they can sting the predators, but hornet moths do not have that type of defense. However, what hornet moths have done is they mimic the appearance of a hornet, and this is able to confuse a predator because the predator may think that it is a hornet and hence is harmful. Thus, the hornet moth is able to protect itself by mimicking the appearance of a hornet. Similarly, we can have snakes that tend to have aposematic coloration and are venomous, and thus they are able to defend themselves from predators. There are some caterpillars that are non-venomous that are known to mimic the appearance of these snakes, and thus they are able to deter predators from attacking them. While it's common for some harmless species to mimic the appearance of harmful species, another way Batesian mimicry is observed is by mimicking the sounds, and this is also called as acoustic mimicry. Another type of mimicry is when different species show similar defenses to ward predators. For example, when we look at the cuckoo bee as well as the yellow jacket, they both look similar and they both use the same strategy or defense to ward off predators, which is to sting the predators. This kind of mimicry is called Mullerian mimicry. Self-mimicry is observed when animals have a body part that looks like another body part. Many insects commonly have spots on the back of their bodies that resemble eyes. Predators are known to attack prey from the back so that the prey cannot see them. In these instances, where there are spots at the back of the body, the predators do not attack from the back because they think that that is the front of the body due to the spots which appear as eyes. Hence, the predators tend to come in front of the animal to attack them, and in these instances, the prey can see them and either flee away or defend themselves in appropriate ways. Tasmanian mimicry is observed in organisms that mimic the appearance of other organisms so that they can blend in and live in the same surroundings as the other organisms. Here's the example of a spider that wants to live among ants, and hence the spider mimics the appearance of ants so that it goes undetected. Most of the mimicries that we have seen so far are associated with prey. We do see predators also mimic prey, and this is called as aggressive mimicry. In these situations, predators or parasites are able to mimic the appearance of prey and hence are not noticed as easily by the prey. Here's an example of a spider that's mimicking the appearance of a ladybug to appear harmless to the prey that are around it. Aggressive or Pygmean mimicry is also observed in octopi. We're able to see some octopus that can arrange their body in ways that they're able to mimic different animals and blend in. When the time is right, they will be able to then attack their prey and thus obtain their nourishment. Look at an interspecific interaction that involves plants. Herbivory is an exploitation interaction where an animal, which is a herbivore, tends to eat plants or algae. In this interaction, the herbivore benefits while the plant is harmed. Herbivores have evolved specialized structures in order to consume plants, and this can be in the form of specialized teeth or different chambers in the digestive system, or even the presence of microbes in their digestive systems that help with the digestion of plant components. In order to counteract herbivores, plants have also evolved different defenses, which can include chemical defenses as well as mechanical defenses like thorns. Parasitism is another type of interspecific interaction that is exploitative in nature. In parasitism, one organism lives either in or on another species and derives nourishment. Thus, one species benefits at the expense of another species. Parasites normally harm the host but usually do not kill the host, and hence they are different from predators. Ectoparasites are those parasites that tend to live on the host or on external surfaces of the host. In the case of plants, the yellow vine dodder is known to be able to obtain food from a host plant that it grows on. Thus, it is not inside the body of the host plant, but is in the outer environment and is able to tap into the host plant to obtain nutrition. On the other hand, endoparasites are parasites that live within the body of the host. An example of an endoparasite is a protist called trypanosoma that's present in human blood. In this picture, we are able to see the disc-shaped red blood cells and the purple irregularly shaped trypanosomans. Endoparasites can have complex life cycles that can involve multiple hosts in some instances. Some endoparasites can even change the behavior of the host that they reside in. For example, Dicrocilium dendriticum is a fluke that belongs to the phylum of Platyhelminthes. It can live in ants as well as in mammals. To go from the ant to the mammal, it tends to make the infected ant climb to the top of a grass so that it can be eaten by the mammal, and thereby it's able to move from the ant to the mammal. The interspecific interactions that we have seen so far tend to be exploitative in nature, where one species benefits while the other one does not. Mutualism is a type of interspecific interaction that benefits all the species involved. The partners involved in these interactions invest energy to reap the benefits, and the cost that they put into the interaction usually results in benefits that outweigh the costs. There are many different examples in nature where organisms exhibit mutualism. One example is when animals like birds or insects obtain nectar from flowers, and thus they're able to gain some nourishment from those flowers. The flowers benefit because these organisms are able to help with pollination, and thus the reproduction of the plant is aided by these organisms. Another example of mutualism is when one organism provides nourishment to another while the other provides protection in turn. Commensalism is an interspecific interaction where one species benefits from the interaction, but the other one does not receive either any benefit nor is harmed with the interaction, and hence there is no effect on the other species. Let us take the example of cattle egrets, which are birds that follow different types of mammals like bison. In this example, the grazing bison are able to disperse insects that are there around them, and these insects are then eaten by the cattle egrets. Thus, the egrets get the benefit of nourishment, but the bison does not receive any benefit from the cattle egrets. It should be noted that relationships between species can change, and thus the interspecific interactions can also change. When we look at the example of the cattle egrets, we can vision a scenario where the egrets start removing and eating ectoparasites that can be present on the bison. These ectoparasites are detrimental to the bison, and thus when the bison provides ectoparasites to the egrets, it is benefited because it no longer has to endure the harm that those ectoparasites provide to it. The egrets are able to obtain nourishment by eating those ectoparasites, so now the relationship has become a mutualistic relationship. Interspecific interactions in a community results in the evolution of traits in both species. This is referred to coevolution, which is a phenomenon where two or more species affect each other's evolution. Let us take the example of prey and predators. The relationship that they have with one another results in the evolution of traits in the prey that allow it to evade the predator, while in the case of the predator, it evolves traits to catch the prey more efficiently. Similarly, when we look at flowers and pollinators, flowers tend to evolve in such a way so that they can attract pollinators better, while pollinators evolve in a manner to obtain nectar more efficiently from the flowers. Thus, both partners are evolving due to the relationships they have with one another. Members of a community that do not directly interact with one another can still affect each other indirectly. We can have a scenario where the presence of one species affects another by interacting with a third type of species. Let us take the example of an experiment that was done between rodents and ants, where the rodents ate larger seeds while ants ate smaller seeds. The rodents and the ants did not interact with one another. Now, ideally, if the rodents are removed, then the ant population should have flourished because there would be more seeds for them to eat. In reality, what was found that the ant population did increase with time, but then there was a decrease in the long term. This was mainly because when the rodents were removed, there were more larger seeds in the environment. These seeds gave rise to more plants that produced more seeds, and hence there were lesser plants that produced the smaller seeds. Thus, the ants could not find enough small seeds to eat. Thus, we can have situations where even though species do not interact with one another, they can still have effects on each other. In many different environments, we can have species whose effects on the composition of the communities are a lot greater than what we would expect. Such species are called keystone species. Keystone species are not the dominant species in a community. However, they benefit a community immensely. They're able to aid communities by keeping the competition in check. There are many different keystone species that can do that, and the example we are going to look at are the sea stars. Sea stars prevent barnacles from outcompeting with other species, and hence the sea stars promote biodiversity in their environments. Similar to sea stars, we do have beavers, elephants, and other types of animals that are keystone species, and hence they are able to enrich the diversity in their communities. The way keystone species are able to promote biodiversity and benefit the environments they live in, we do have other species that are actually detrimental to the habitats. Invasive species are those organisms that are not native to a habitat, and they are introduced either purposefully or by accident. Invasive species compete with native species, but are usually better in gaining resources from the environment. Native species hence are unable to compete with the invasive species that tend to grow in larger numbers very quickly. Invasive species perturb ecosystems detrimentally by reducing the diversity in the ecosystem and driving other species to extinction. An example of an invasive species are the Burmese python that are now found in Florida. With this, we come to the end of our talk where we learned about communities and different interspecific interactions, which include competition, predation, parasitism, and herbivory, which are exploitative types of interactions. We also looked at beneficial interactions like mutualism and commensalism. We learned about coevolution and different types of species like keystone species and invasive species and the roles that they play in the environments that they live in.